Hi, I wanted to kind of give a um, little opening before we get into this week's episode. I know we told you guys this is going to be a show that's going to be episode by episode breakdown of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. However, we recorded an episode earlier this week, kind of in the start of all of this that is going on, right? The very beginning of everything. As news keeps going forward, and as we are now dealing with the aftermath of the horrendous murder of Floyd, I felt it would be irresponsible for us not to have this episode go out this week. A little change in programming. If you are following along, we are going to be talking about this week, episode 8 of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. 8? Is it episode 8? Episode 6, I'm sorry. Obviously, it's not in the right space. We are going to go ahead and go with our episode 6 of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where me and Sonya talk about kind of our dealings with police, our thoughts with policing, and how it deals with being two people of color, especially in this situation with me being a black man of color and her being an indigenous woman of color. This is it. There's no really good way of transitioning or doing this, and it kind of feels a little grody. 'Cause it feels like I'm profiting off of something, and I'm not trying to. I want to put things out there, and I have a lot I want to say, and I feel like putting this out here would probably be the best way of me being able to say that. In lieu of all that, I do. We're not going to go into. I'm not going to put the opening on. We're going to go right into the episode. We're going to talk about, we're going to talk about dealing with life and dealing with everything. If you do want to support what's been going on, help out the protesters, um, I would recommend please go and search George Floyd. There are a number of great organizations that are trying to help the family of Mr. Floyd, to help the protesters. Please do that. Give your money to that. I, I hesitate to come on here and say that these aren't going to be political speakings and how we're going to come off isn't going to sound political because it is. Um, we shouldn't feel like a human life can be politicized, but it has been, and we can no longer sit and be idle as genocide continues to happen, and we do nothing about it. That's this week's episode. We will try to have a little bit more fun episodes in the future. There's a lot of great guests coming soon. So there's a lot to look forward to with the show, but I felt I'd be disingenuous if I didn't put this episode out. Thank you guys so much for supporting. And I really hope this gives a small, brief respite into your whole day with everything that's going on. Thank you. Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Live from the Pool House. We are live from said pool house. I am TL Foster and I am joined by
Sonya Ballantyne.
hey Sonya, we are now officially we're 6 episodes into this thing, right? Like
Oh,
it's now a thing. We can't like not say it's not a thing, like it's almost 2 months old now, right? Uh, which is crazy because like when you look at it, not to get all nasal gazy because we're just really early. We've been shooting some of these like a little bit behind the curtain for you guys. We've been shooting some of these out of order for some of the guests that we had. Like last week we had Chris Antista. We have some other guests that I can't wait to tell you guys about, but it will be in the future. So shooting these out of order was kind of like a little weird. But it's like shooting a TV show. Like sometimes you shoot episodes out of order, right? So that's been fun too.
oh yeah. Well, and especially if we have an episode, like say if for some good reason that I hope we can do, get Cree Summer on to talk about her episode. Like I
Yeah.
wouldn't be against that, even though it's in like season 6. But still, it's like,
Right.
but I would love to get her on here. Just saying, Cree, hit us up.
Or like we're getting like in this first season like Queen Latifah. That'd be great.
Oh my
Cause
god, if I could.
She's in the season twice. If people don't realize that, I'm just like, she plays an old lady and a young lady.
Yeah.
I'm just like, wild.
But if she was on the show, all I would do is like, please, just talk. I love you, woman. Like, let's talk about Sit It Off, please. So.
I don't know. Maybe we could use your new friend Mick Foley.
Foley, yes.
Foley on this show.
Does he know Queen Latifah? No, but we can have him on the show. Yeah.
Hey, you know what? We're talking about '90s. I'm pretty sure there's a wrestling. If we Mick Foley would be great if there was like a wrestling episode.
Yeah, exactly.
We could talk about it.
Well, there is a wrestling episode of Family Matters. I don't know if there's a wrestling episode of Fresh Prince.
There is and it has the Bushwhackers in it.
Yes, I love that episode because wrestling was real for a second then.
But this episode, as we are very frivolous and having a lot of fun, we're going to kind of breeze through a lot of this, but this episode is a very important one, so there's going to be not a lot of fun conversation to have, but a lot of very important conversation to have. Yeah. This episode is Mistaken Identity. If you'll go ahead, Sonya, with the beats.
So season 1, episode 6, Mistaken Identity, which first aired October 15th, 1990. It was directed by Jeff Melman and was written by the show producers Susan and Andy Borowitz. And in this episode, Will and Carlton are arrested, possibly because Will may or may not be notorious child killer Freddy Krueger. But one thing I wanted to bring up before we start, I only know where Palm Springs is a place because of this show. And because Golden Girls mentioned that Sonny Bono was once the mayor of Palm Springs, so I guess it's in Southern California somewhere. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's like sort of like near Southern California and Nevada, right? Like people don't realize like Los Angeles and Las Vegas are not like too far away, and Palm Coast is kind of like in the middle of that. Our California listeners will probably tell me I'm wrong, but that's what I remember. So. Don't judge me too hard on that.
Yeah, Palm Springs is tucked away all the way down there somewhere. Like
it's in there, next to San Diego. Like it's just part of there.
Like right? I only know like in San Diego, all I know is the convention center. That's about it. And my hotels.
I've never been to San Diego, so like that's more than I know. Like I said, L.A. I know L.A. L.A. is kind of like a weird metropolis. Like It's like you ever seen those like mobiles where you have like the marbles and you can move the marbles around? That's what LA feels like. But anything outside of that, have no idea and no clue.
All I know is wrestlers. That's about it. But...
Absolutely. Where is this from Death Valley? That's what I would want to know, right?
It's like between LA and Vegas. So I've been there. It was pretty cool. But so this episode is about Palm Springs, and Aunt Viv and Uncle Phil are heading to a parents' retreat in Palm Springs, leaving Hilary in charge of Ashley, or Ashley in charge of Hilary, depending on who you ask. And Jeffrey has the weekend off. So the whole inciting incidents of this episode is that Will wants to go to Palm Springs with the family, so with the parents. So he makes a suggestion to Phil's law partner, that Will drive a responsible young man drive the partner's car to Palm Springs from LA, because the parents are taking a helicopter. And in obvious sitcom fashion, Will is not the chosen young man. It's Carlton.
Right.
So,
which is kind of like
go ahead.
As we get more into the show, it almost plays on its head, like, because as we get further in the show, a lot of times we'll get opportunities that you would think would be for Carlton. But this is the first time where the guy's like, no, Carlton is the answer for it. So it's definitely very fun. Like, it plays off like with Carlton and Will, there's like a Bugs Bunny, Donald Duck kind of aspect going towards it. And this time it actually like plays into Donald Duck's favor, right? So that was definitely very fun.
I did like that too. Just because the partner knows about the girls and their skimpy bikinis, and like it's one of the things he tries to use to entice Carlton, and all Carlton cares about is getting his golf game on while he's there. So golf is something weird to me. I don't understand people who play it. It's just like you hit a stick really hard or something. I don't know.
I don't. Golf is fun. I don't mean that as like because I enjoy golf, but like I also like I'm a bleeding heart leftist, so there's a lot of things inherently like the water conservation that we have with golf. But at the same time, golf is fun. I enjoy golf. It's a weird thing, but like I get because like people like I don't get baseball, right? Like I like baseball, okay, but I don't like. I don't know. It's a weird thing. Golf is more fun to play. And if you've never played it, I can't really explain it to you.
Yeah,
That's the kind of gist
you
of
gotta
it.
be in one of those moods. But it reminds me of a joke later in the series where Carlton is trying to tell Will about the how fun skiing is,
Mm.
and Will tells him, Carlton, skiing is for white guys named Sven and OJ Simpson. So I'm like, that's how I feel about golf because my older coworkers are really into it, but all I want to do is drive the cart. That's what I want to do. So,
It's
but
very fun.
but this one joke in this episode that I always love is the scene where Carlton's on the freeway in the law partner's car, and he's singing a song to himself all happily, and he's planning. He's dictating what his plans for Palm Springs are. And he's counting them down point by point. And when he gets to 4, Will appears in the back of the car just as Freddy Krueger. So complete with the hand and putting on like a scary voice, and it was always my favorite bit of comedy just for how Will's hand comes into frame. Just for the benefit of the audience though, because I'm like, Carlton can't see that. So,
Right.
it's so good. I love that. I just love that.
It's really good staging, right?
Yes.
Like it's such a really good like for the audience, especially like this was done on a live studio audience. And I don't know because everything is done with laugh tracks. I don't know how you like stage for a studio audience now, or if that's a lost art. But being able to get those people's reactions, I think that's such the like perfect just ring to it.
Yeah, it was like you could hear the little titter of laughter when his hand appears, because they know it's not Freddy Krueger for real. It could be, I don't know, but it's just really funny to me the way you can hear everybody's reaction as the hand comes into view, which is weird because I'm like, maybe it's because I'm a girl, but I always check the back seat when I get into cars, so I don't know how Carlton missed that spot check. So.
Oh, you have to, because what if someone's in your car? So,
yeah. Well, this scene is probably why I check my back seat. But one thing I wanted to bring up with you, TL, about this is the first time I noticed that Will called Carlton an Oreo. I thought he had, I was watching it with the captions on, and so I always thought that he had called him an orange. Or something. So, but for those that don't know, a lot of people of color have terms that they call other people of color that they feel are acting white. So,
right.
For example, with Native people, a Native person that's acting white, we call them apples. So it's red on the outside, white on the inside.
White on the inside, right.
Yeah. And I think Oreo is the term with amongst black people.
Right, yeah, because black on the outside, white on the inside. I always find those phrases like, so this is a weird thing, and it's usually done with a lot of younger, black people, because when you try to find who you are as you grow up, you're very rebellious, and you feel like people should be one way, right? I've never liked that term because at the end of the day, I'm black, Carlton's black, and this episode kind of shows it, right? I don't care what you say someone's inside is. Unfortunately, how we live in our society, what your outward appearance is your outward appearance, right? And what I hate about phrasing like that, it allows people who are not that minority to get a chance to be like, well, I could say it because you're not blah, because Egg said you're not blah, right? I remember when I first started working online, I had somebody say, well, I'm more black than you are. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're white. I am black. I don't care what experience you have. At the end of the day, I'm black. So something like the Oreo, it's like a softer term of something like Uncle Tom, right? Where Uncle Tom has this very loaded connotation behind it, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So it's a big issue, right? the thing with Oreo is just a very softer way of saying that. But to me, it's still very grody, and I'm not, I'm not a huge fan of it. And I'm glad that they did like talk about that part, like talk about like the actual problem with that in this episode,
Hmm.
because that would have been the thing where I'd been like, this sucks shit, like this shouldn't be.
Yeah, and this is a joke that, like, well, not even a joke, but it's something that a person of color would get immediately, like,
Right.
and because we've all had those terms, and like I imagine you were called that too. Like, I've been called an apple because of my interests that aren't native, like being a goth little kid on a res who listens to you too. Like, I was a fucking apple. Sorry
Right.
for sorry, I'll beef that up. But it's like it's so hurtful because I like every time somebody called me, like when my mom called me that once, I freaked out because I was like, I am native, like I can't hide the fact that I am native from people, and like just because people think I'm an apple doesn't mean that I'm safe from people also knowing that I'm native. So it's just like
Right.
it's a really loaded term, especially like which I imagine a lot of non people of color would not get because they'd be like, Oreo, that's a funny thing to call a person. Like, and I'm
Right.
like, oh, like no,
It,
it's not. Yeah.
yeah, it's the reason why I hate something like have you ever seen the Chris Rock comedy special where he does
Oh,
black
about
people
the
versus
N word.
N word?
Yeah. Like I
Yeah,
like.
I
Yeah.
think I think that's one of the most destructive things to ever happen to black people because it gave a lot of people who were kind of on those fringes and they were fans of Chris Rock who were not black to say like, oh well, if I say N word, I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about people who are ignorant, and anyone can be an N word. And it's like, no, but you miss what the cultural history of that word is, and that's what he missed in that. It was a joke. It was him still doing social commentary, but it wasn't a good joke because it set a bad precedent. It's stuff like when people do use Oreo, or when we have, a presidential candidate who says that if you don't vote for him, you're not really black. Like that stuff, right? That stuff, like it it gets spurred on because we allow stuff like Oreo and we allow this stuff to intersect into our culture
Mm-hmm.
because we set it through, and then when stuff happens like the rest of this episode, you kind of figure like you find out like I don't care what your interests are, and the world doesn't care what your interests are. They don't care what you like. They don't care how you speak, right? Because that's my big barrier. I grew up on bases my whole life, so when I first moved to the South, I don't have an accent and I don't speak in what people would say like black speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because like I have a different like growing up structure. So when you have that and you have all that stuff going in, like you can't say this person is white because at the end of the day, the people who are in position of power, they don't see Sonya as a white person who just happens to be native, or RTL, a black person who just happens to be, I mean, a white person who just happens to be black. They see a native person, they see a black person, and that's the thing that I wish more people would be cognizant of, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, especially with that, like Chris Rock joke about like not even the joke, like about how he loves black people but he hates N
Right.
words, and I'm just like, I could see how, like, in the context of where you're telling it in front of your friends, like where you're all black, yeah. Like that, we do that all the time as Native people, but it's like it gives power to people. Like it's not the same, but like it's like when people call it, when there's a hurtful word for you, especially in that context with like how loaded the N word is in terms of like the history of it. Like whenever
Mm.
there's a word that you can use to describe people, it's like it's dehumanizing no matter who uses it, even if you're trying to reclaim it. And
Right.
it's like it's no, like it still has power, like to say. And I hate when non people of color bring use it and say like, well, it eliminates its power if you use it more. I'm like, no, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't, and it still puts you in a position of power. And like you said, like that's the thing. It's like everyone will say like, oh well, if the more you use it, the less power it gives. It's like no, it's like you still have a position of power over it. It's now you have the ability to say it because at the end of the day, you're still using it as a derogatory term for somebody else. Don't get me wrong. I am saying this right now. I love saying the N word. You will not catch me on like there. I think I've done like 2 or 3 podcasts where I said it. I love it. Like you said, it's in my culture. I never said it before I moved to Alabama. When I moved to Alabama, it became a term of endearment for me. I love saying it. I have had to learn not to say it, and I don't say it because of the spaces that I'm in. We talked about when we first started the show being very open, and this is the show that we want to be frank with white people. Honestly, it's a phrase I don't want white people saying. So
Yeah.
if I'm going to ask you not to say it, I'm not going to say it around you. I'm
Mhm.
not going to introduce you to because we don't have that familiarity, and that's familiarity of years of struggle, years of strife, years of what that word's meant to. It's like with any other slur that is used from culture to culture. If a culture reclaims it, let that culture reclaim it, and that's their word to reclaim it. And I look at it like this: I don't ever call somebody's mom by their first name unless we are really, really close, right?
Yeah.
And that's my thing. You could say, "Oh, hey, my mom's name is blah." You can call her by her first name. Cool. I'm not because that's not my way of doing that.
Mhm.
And just use it like that. Just that's my way of saying like you have to be respectful of boundaries. You have to set those boundaries up.
Yeah, exactly. But related to that, another word that I had to look up before for this episode. I don't know what I didn't know what a Shasta was. So like,
So
yeah, I had
I
to
am
look it
too
up.
young to have Shasta. I think it's a cola.
Yeah, it's
I want to say it's a cola.
yeah, I assume so, and I was just like, because I know that there are like specific products that only exist in one certain place. Like I know Australia had these chips that I love that they don't have anywhere else in the world, or like same thing. Well, it's all chips, I think, because there's one chip in my country that we have that nowhere else has, and they're delicious. But it was so funny to me. I'm like, what the hell's a Shasta? Is it like a sandwich? So
So Shasta sodas are still a thing you can get. Um, they are colas. They're kind of like. Do you know what an RC cola is?
yes, yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of like RC colas. You can get them in both America and Canada.
Where? I should look
I'm
it up.
looking. I'm looking online. Let's see. Let's see. Ontario at the Giant Tiger.
Oh, Ontario. Okay. Well,
Well, no, they have it other places too. In Alberta at the Giant Tiger, and at Northern, and at Northmark. I don't know what these stores are. Are these
uh,
real stores?
the Northern and the Northmart are basically the Walmarts of Northern Canada.
Okay.
They are owned by the Northwest Company, which was a fur trading company back in the 1800s, but now they oversell meat. Like for example, there's a KFC in the Northern in a place called Garden Hill, where a $5 combo in Minnesota would
Mm.
cost $25 for chicken. So it's like it's kind of a shilly place. It's a terrible place. You never shop at the Northern. You go somewhere else.
Well, apparently they have Shasta sodas.
We have to go there for Shasta now.
We have to go there to get Shasta sodas, and I actually did see that there are also Shasta sodas in Florida. So when this episode goes up, I might buy some Shasta soda and put it on there. Uh,
Oh, but like one thing I wanted to mention about this episode too is I like the mix of comedy and the seriousness. I think that's why it hits so hard, is because like a lot of people who haven't experienced racism have this idea that racism is always these outright negative, outright malicious acts. And no, it's not
right.
that. Like our lives are mixed with like happiness and fun and cracking jokes about our backgrounds, but it's all like the worst racism is the insidious racism. It's like the racism that Will faces here, where he knows the situation about what's happening to Carlton, and Carlton can't see because he's never had to go through that before.
Right.
Knowing what the cop means by not saying anything, really. Or and I do love the comedy, like especially the bit where like Will pretends to lose his head, like where he's just like, I really like that head. And so but I like the second the cop shows up, it's like that scene in Get Out at the end, like you just like know that something bad's gonna happen. Like I don't
Right.
know if it's the same thing for you, TL, but like me seeing a cop car does not inspire any sort of safety.
No, it doesn't. It's like I dread it. And it's I have a very weird relationship with the police. My best friend, like one of my best friends in the world, was best friend at his wedding. I love the guy to death. He's close to my brother. his family are like all police, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like his mom is a detective. His sisters work in corrections. His dad, I believe, also is a detective in St. Petersburg. Like, so he is like, his family is police. But I love them, and they are some of my favorite people in the world. But I can't sit here and tell you I've had great experiences with the police. I've been stopped while walking to school and asked why was I going to school and put in the back of a police car, and two, while I was walking on a Sunday while there was no school and I was just walking where I used to live. There used to be there was a school right next to it. I was stopped there. Um, because some vandalism had happened and I had fit an MO. I was like a 10-year-old kid.
Mm-hmm.
I and like I said, I have those friends. I had an uncle who worked for the chief of police in Foley, Alabama. I I have never been under the look of all cops are bad, right? I don't believe in that philosophy because I do think there is something that has to be made for a centralized order of people who their job is to ensure that that just and right works. Because if it doesn't, how we live in society, and I know I'm getting very heady, but it is something that's always
We
it's something
live
that
in a
always
society, yeah.
yeah, it's something that always it's always been there, right? And I always want to talk about it, and I think it's very important. We live in a society where if we we live in a society, but if we lose those structures, right? Um, Unfortunately, it becomes a majority mob rule,
Mhm.
and as a minority, I feel like as soon as we lose those structures, we're going to get to a situation where we are under the whim of a majority, fighting, for us as a main tactic, or we end up very, to a lack of a better word, and I apologize if this comes off as insensitive, but tribalism, right?
Yeah.
Because it then becomes, okay, well, I have this person, that person, and I don't think that is a centered structure. However, I do think a lot of police departments can be corrupt. I do think the problem with humanization and the problem with not stringently testing or vetting people you have in these systems does allow people to come in there with their own biases, come in there with their own structures and their own ideas and beliefs, and unfortunately, it does allow and profits up racist.
Yeah.
Um, and I think about any job you do, lower level people at any job you do, you have the mixture. You have the people who are going to be great, and that you have at lower levels, but at the end of the day, you know that they're going to move forward. But then you have the people who are not, who are bad at their job, and as you see with every job, those people get promoted, and that happens in police all the time. And that's why I always like when people see something like, well, you have to look at the cop side. The cops do a thankless job. Like the cops do a thankless job. You're absolutely right, but that's their job.
Hmm.
And that is the thing that they have to do, and it has to be a thankless job because as soon as it doesn't become that, then we're in a system now where we're going to be able to promote people who are egomaniacs, who are sycophants, who are like I
Fascists, yeah.
can't, yeah, who are fascists, right, and then put them in position of power over people. So the problem that we have with police is that it has to be more stringent, like policing with inside the police, internal affairs. Like they can't. Every cop movie I see with the internal affairs department is like the bad guy,
Mm.
pisses me off because that's the only way we can make sure this like stuff actually works. Is we have to make sure that they are policing themselves because if we can't police themselves, we end up with stuff like in Los Angeles from the 90s. We end up with stuff in New York, and we end up with stuff like today. Like there's still things that happen now because we don't like aggressively do as we should to monitor the policing that we have.
Yeah.
That's my long rating in saying it. I'm sorry, it's not funny, and I'm not going to be funny later
Yes.
on either. But it's something I'm very passionate about because I don't believe in the fact that we should get rid of policing altogether because I do think that comes from a position of privilege. If
Mm.
I am white, I that of course we get rid of policing. That's fine because like I'm a majority, right? As a minority, I feel very strongly that there should still be a centralized force, but it has to be done and it has to be highly regulated.
Yeah, like that's the same thing. Like I have the same like confusing relationship with the police. In Canada they're called the RCMP, and they're like nationwide. Like
Hmm.
they cover all of the land, which included like the res. Like we have our local police in the city, like my city, Winnipeg, but like the RCMP is the national police force. And my dad had a close relationship with a lot of cops. Like my best friends were the kids of policemen back then.
Hmm.
And but the problem was like they would come up north for like my reserve for 3 years, and then they'd leave to move somewhere
Right.
else because the northern locations were where they would have to pay their dues until they got a better assignment. And
Right.
so, but I also had a really negative relationship with the cops because I grew up. My grandfather's brother was picked up for drunken disorderly, and taken to the police station that was 60 kilometers away. It was winter,
Hmm.
and nobody knew where my grandfather Francis was, and the cops just let him leave and said like, well, you can go home. So he decided to walk home by following the power lines the 60 kilometers back to his home res, but he never made it, and he froze to
Hmm.
death in the woods. And
Hmm.
so it was like stuff like this, like that was why my great grandfather hated cops, was because he blamed them for what happened to Francis. And
Right.
so there's still stuff like that that happens. Like there was a situation that happened in a community TL and I are a part of, where I was receiving death threats. And when I went to the local police, because like I was told like on the non-emergency line, like go report this. So I was like, okay, I will. So I went to report this, and I met with like this like white as rice young cop who saw my messages and said, well, what did you do to deserve those?
Right.
What did you say to get this done? And I'm like, and they're like, well, we don't know if they're going to attack you. And I'm like, dude, he knows where I live, like sort of thing.
Right.
And so, and he's like, well, we don't, like, you did say some stupid things online, so maybe don't say stupid things online. And I'm like, dude, will you be telling me this if I wasn't native? And
Right.
so, like, and he made a big deal, like, no, he's not racist, blah, blah, blah. And luckily, nothing, like, I'm still here, I think. Yeah. So nothing
Right.
happened. But it was still such a horrible thing because I was like, I would rather deal with these guys on my own than deal with
Hmm.
the cops, because I knew that was going to happen. And I like,
Right.
which was terrible because like it made me feel like Will in this episode, where you know how the interaction's gonna go because the cop is white.
Yeah, it's a very defeating thing. One of the things, like, so I got into a car accident last year, and or not last year, no, this was like 3 years ago. Ended up totaling my car, and one of the things the cop said, and I think he was saying it just to like to make levity of the situation, but it really pissed me off. He was like, "Oh, like you have like a clean record. I've never seen anybody like have a record this clean before." And I just wanted to be like, "Yeah," because I didn't want motherfuckers to like pull me over. I'll bleep that, or this won't just be explicit. But like, I just wanted you guys to pull me over and be like, "Oh yeah, we have all this stuff on on Travis on TL." So I very actively do that, and like you said, it sucks. It sucks because I shouldn't have to be afraid to go to the police,
Yeah.
right? And it should be something that is used against us. But as we see in this episode, like it's something that's like it's kind of inherently in, and it the 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 thing that I push back on again, why I push back on the ABCAP stuff is the argument is that all humans are inherently bad. And I don't believe that. I
Mm.
refuse to believe that because I refuse to live into a life where I will allow a negativity of a moment to dictate how I think humanity moves forward. I refuse to believe that. But the problem is we have become so pigheaded and stubborn to think that we can never be wrong on something, and that's where a lot of the issue comes in, right? A lot of cops, honestly, if you like, a lot of people, let's say, it's like, oh, they're just normal people. They are normal people, but they feel like, here's how I'm supposed to act because this is what I was always told I'm supposed to act. And not a lot of people will look at that and be like, okay, well, what if I challenged how I was taught?
Hmm.
And I think that's always important. And as people, and it's something that I want to really put it up, as people, we need to be able to look at something and challenge how we think about something because how we think about something can evolve, and how we act and how we move can evolve. And that's the way we get out of that stagnation. How we get out of this issue where we have cops like this is we are allowed ourselves to realize, okay, something I thought was wrong, cool. All right, let me fix it. And then move forward. That's it. That's all anyone asks you to do. Life isn't telling you you have to be 100% PC because you can't. You physically can't because you don't know, because you don't have the ability to meet and know everyone. You are going to say something that's going to be messed up. You are going to use prejudices. That's how life works.
Yeah.
The way of getting past that is using that, seeing that, okay, got it. Move forward. I know how I'm supposed to act. And that's the thing that we have to ask for people. That's the thing we have to need for people to do.
And it's kind of hard, too, because, like, I'm discussing that, too, about the idea that hope in when things have been easy is always an easy thing to do, but hope when you've gone through such trauma is such a hard thing. Like, I want to be able to trust the police. Like, I want to have that, like, childhood wonder of, like, being okay with the cops, but, like, we don't live in a futuristic utopia. And it's really sad, like, especially in Canada. Like, if anyone wants to look into it, look at the relationship with the RCMP and the police. Look at how the Vancouver Police Department handled the Picton cases that were largely Indigenous women, like the Highway of Tears in BC, where a disproportional amount of Indigenous women go missing, and like very recently, a cop got reprimanded because he was using excessive force on an Indigenous woman, and it's just like, damn it, like I can't. But I have so many friends who are Indigenous who have become police and do good work, but it's like it's hard because it's like, are you the Galen Erso of this situation? You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, it's like I'm going to take him down from the inside, sort of thing. But I think that it is important to have more people like us in those positions. But it's just a hard road to hoe, I think. But as we find out, as it's obvious in this episode, Will and Carlton go to jail.
Yes.
Where the scary white man in the jail cell is the real MVP of this episode, because just the like, I love the little like, because I'll mention it later, but I love his clenched fists as he's singing "Let My People Go." It's just like beautiful. so
he is the person I remember. Like, obviously I remember the story of this episode, but he is the person I remember more, and like, it's just like this giant dude singing show tunes. I'm like,
I have all the songs he sang. I looked them up, and the songs he sings are "Go Down Moses," "Clap Your Hands" from the musical "Okay," Barry Manilow's "I Write the Songs," MacArthur Park, and the song "One." But it also has the best quote about why they have to get out of the best like line of the episode, where Will is deciding they have to get out, and Carlton asks him why, and he's like, "That white dude's scaring me. When you see a white guy in jail, you know he did something bad." And so that just hit me so hard. I'm like, oh yeah, like what did Bob do before he got there? Yeah, what did he do to get put into prison in Palm Springs?
He was out singing show tunes while he murdered somebody. Like there's a like 12 episode like
True
cold
Detective,
case,
yeah.
True Detective like podcast like sitting right there of like the secret files of Bob. Show tunes Bob.
But Bob is played by Raymond McLeod, who is a baritone singer who was in the original Broadway cast of Jekyll and Hyde and played Juan Perón in Evita. And I really wanted to know, like, I couldn't find any information on it, but I wanted to know how he came up on the show. Like, because he has, like, 2 modes this episode: Broadway performer and scary white man in the corner. And, like, we don't find out how Will discovers that Bob is his name. So,
well, I mean, they were in there for a while,
hours,
right?
Yeah.
And he does have such a beautiful voice. Like, just like when he comes in, it's like, "Tell the evil Pharaoh, let my people." I'm like, wow. I would have been so like, oh, it's so great. I love it. It's like I said, I think it's some of the great, and I compared Carlton and Will like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, but this is definitely like more like the not Abbott and Costello, but the Bob Hope and Bob Hope and the other the destination movies, right?
Mhm.
Like this has that kind of a flair to it because it's like it is like the shenanigans these two go into, and that's like some of the best episodes. Some of my favorite episodes are them playing off each other because neither are the straight guy, but they are like an Abbott or Costello, or like they're able to like tell these jokes with each other and just be fun.
Mhm.
And it's something that's not a very fun subject, but they can be fun with it. Like Will giving them sass, like it's like I'm just gonna use my one phone call. He uses phone call and tries to call Jeffrey, and Jeffrey just yells at him. It's like, I'm off. I am tired of doing favors for you spoiled
Spoiled
children. And
children, yes.
hangs up the phone. Like I love that, and just like Will, like I said, Will's taking it seriously, but not. He's being goofy about it, right? And
Mhm.
then and Carlton's going through. I love though, however, how they're able to trick uh, the way of being able to tell Phil and Uncle Phil and Aunt Viv, and that's by saying that they are the people who did the murders, and then
But
they're
they'll
just
only
on.
confess if they have a camera crew.
Yeah, and then like you just see Will, yeah, I did it, now do it again, and then Carlton's just like, "Mommy, help me!" It's so good, and so
And you can
funny.
see Bob in the background, like just like staring at them creepily.
It's so
Oh,
definitely good.
I just love that. It's so funny to me. Like, cause like it, like again, this episode is just like a good mix of the serious and the funny. Cause like
Mhm.
I remember this episode more like for how it made me feel in terms of like how hard I laughed at certain things. Like especially when Jeffrey is like insulting the kids to their faces, or when he answers the phone because Hilary won't answer it, and he just answers lazy house. So, and like when was it when Hilary gives espresso to Ashley and stuff, and like just the cute stuff of this episode is like it really sums up the experience of being a person of color and dealing with racism, because it is not like racism is a common part of our life, but so is like the happiness we have. Like
Right.
I sound like such a card, but but I love how savage Aunt Vivian is in this episode when they arrive.
Right.
I love that when she's told to calm down, she says like "calm yourself, Barney Fife," and starts taking off her earrings. I just so. But one part that really freaked me out that I didn't really realize. Now that I'm a little older, I see it a little bit more. The absolute contempt and like the attempt to brush off Phil and Vivian because
Mhm.
of the way the cops try to brush them off, and they only speak with respect when the law partner arrives.
Right. And it's one of those things. And again, hey, we're back to the downer part, right? Because we're gonna talk about race and all this stuff. It's one of the things that like being a black person again, why stuff like Oreo bothers me a lot, right? Or like the conversations about that, because at the end of the day, like the people who are going to harm you the most because of your race, they don't really care,
Mm-hmm.
what you are. They just see your race, right? So as of this recording, the big thing that happened this weekend was there was an issue where a lady was in a park without her dog, unchained, and a guy who was a bird watcher told her, "Hey, put your dog back on the leash." She wouldn't. He tried to give the dog treats. I want to give every backstory so people can't say I'm fabricating anything. She tried to give the dog treats. She grabbed the dog over, so he proceeded to film her. Film her. As she did that, she was very much like, "I don't know what you're doing," blah 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 blah. And then she said, "I'm going to call the cops and say an African American man is threatening my life." She has since this recording has been fired from her job. Her dog has been taken away from her from the people who she rescued the dog from.
Mm-hmm.
All this stuff has been done. However, like as someone who is black, like that is to me that's the most terrifying thing, right? Like I've grown up in the South. Um, I've grown up I've grown up around like basically what Jim Crow era stuff is, right? My dad's side of the family has a very like strong history in black activism and dealing with the civil rights movement. My aunt who I lived with. Her senior class was the first class to integrate into Foley High School. Um, my dad, very famously, like when my dad was growing up, like he would have to pick pecans to buy a jacket. Like we are not a rich family. And at the end of the day, like we are who we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to have that and to know that at any time you can be it can be weaponized just being who you are. Like I'm a 5'11", over like I'm at the 300-pound border, right? Black dude. I'm a big dude, right? And yeah, if you talk to me, I have no threatening aura about myself, right? But like I'm a big dude, and I know that I'm a big dude. So like it's always I always like it's a touchy subject with me because at any time I feel like I can be taken out just because I represent a threat. Not that I
Mm-hmm.
am a threat and I represent a threat, and it's because people use stuff like race and people's size and stuff like that as barriers for people, and they don't see people as people, and they use that as attack mechanisms. Like this story, we all can laugh about it and call her Karen, and she loses her job, and she makes these posts about, or she'll see an oh, my life is ruined, right? Um, and that is the best case scenario. Best case scenario, we see her, she acts like a racist, we treat her like a racist, right? Like I don't know what's in her heart. You don't know what is in anybody's heart, but that's racial. What she did was racially changed. Yeah, like a racist, you get treated like a racist.
Mm-hmm.
But what if the cost came, right? And what if they took that threat as a literal threat that he was going to harm for her, and they shoot him?
Yeah.
You know, I don't, I don't know, Then what does this story become, right? Do we have another thing where we had a cop who went to a black man's house and shot a black man in his house because she thought it was her house, and her whole thing was like, well, I thought it was my house, and I was just like, at what point? At what point can we just exist, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's like, and when I see something like in this episode, and it's the thing that Carlton has to struggle with. It's like, how do I exist? How do I live and be a person, right? And that's the thing that I to this day, it's 2020. I don't know what the answer to that is, right? I don't
Yeah.
know how we are to exist because at any time, if anything happened to me and I was shot, not only would I be shot, there would be stories about how I'm an asshole, how I did like 20 million things. They will find every narrative to smear the fact that I got shot.
Yeah. Like it's like.
And I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no! Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, and it's both frustrating and infuriating, and it's a lot. A writer I know, he said like he's like, I always get mad when people put me as an angry black dude, but it's like, what do you expect? We have all this injustice and everything like that, and I was like, yeah, like everyone always was complaining about black men being mad or black women being mad. That's the best trope, right? Is that black women of color in general, but black women always mad, right? But like, think of this. This is gonna be unbelievable. I am gonna go explicit on this. Think of the shit that gets piled upon us all the time. And like I said, to me, it's women of color. So like, I remember when that stuff happened with you in the Laser Time group, and I remember happening to you, and then a lot of your replies, also with a lot of our other friends, like to the point where people had to change their names, and
Mhm.
I'm just like like when you think about it just like it irritates the piss out of me because it's like, why do you think people are mad? Why do you think women don't want to be a part of like a space that feels contentious? Why do you think black people don't want to be a part of the space that feels contentious? And everyone always wants to be like, well, they have to like. It's always put on minorities or the lower class to ingratiate themselves.
Mhm.
No, we have to start making barriers break through. Again, like I said earlier, you not knowing everything, that's fine. It happens. Cultures are a thing. However, you have to be more culturally accepting, not culturally appropriating, but culturally accepting what goes on. See something, learn something, move forward, and that's the thing. Like I hope that this is what that episode gets pulled off. It's like Carlson wasn't seen as a rich person. Carlson wasn't seen as a white person. Carlson was seen as a black person who was in jail because he fit a description that most black people would fit.
Yeah, that was what, going back to what you said about living as like with this new knowledge. I have some note. My name has some note
Hmm.
in my city right now. Like I get
Right.
asked to do conferences, like these little things. And I distinctly remember, I thought like racism was over for me. Like at 33, I'm like, okay, we've turned a corner. Racism doesn't happen to me anymore. And so I went to a conference, and on the second day, I realized the night after I did it that I left my MacBook adapter there. And the first day I was dressed up because it was a big conference, it was a big deal, it was fancy, so I was wearing a dress, I was dressed up, wearing makeup. The next day I went in with like just my normal clothes, which was like black jeans, a hoodie, like my pins on, my backpack, and I go in and I'm distinctly like obviously treated a lot differently because people don't know that the girl that was the keynote the day before is this girl
Right.
in the hoodie. And people were just so rude to me. A guy who was complimenting me on my poise and my ability to inspire kids of indigenous backgrounds just blew me off immediately.
Mm.
And it was like the worst thing because I'm just it is such a difficult thing to be able to just be dismissed so easily, even though like they were just the day before treating me like I was like such a great thing. And I'm like I feel tokenized in that way. Like yeah, like I could talk about like the impact of how dangerous it is to be an indigenous woman, and especially where I live. Or when I was telling you about
Mm.
how I was receiving those death threats and like the cops were not really taking it seriously. And I'm like, dude, I'm a native woman. Like I take this shit seriously all the time. Like
Right.
how easy it is for any of us to go missing, and like how it'll be blamed on me if I go missing. And
Right.
so it's just a horrible thing, and I hope like we haven't chased off everybody with our discussion about like
No,
like
but I
this
mean,
is
this is
yeah.
this is the thing. It's like I do want to have these conversations, and I think it's important, right? And this is like I said, I'm not doing a bit. I really do think it's very important, and I think it's important for people of all races, but especially white people, to get in these conversations, right?
Hmm.
And to hear from us and say, hey, here's what's going on, because like I said earlier, that's the only way you know, and you can get better. I'm not asking every white person to be perfect. It's not
Hmm.
going to happen. It's just life, how life is set up, how your life is set up. Like, again, I even understand the white people are like, I don't see privilege. Like, yeah, if you're a poor white person, I would not see it either. You
Yeah.
have to kind of pull the layers back. Like, you being a poor white person, me being a poor black person, those are two different things, right? But I understand where you're coming from.
Hmm.
But you have to be willing to listen to people, and you have to be willing and understanding to adjust your worldview once you've heard different experiences.
Yeah.
That's what I think is the important thing about doing this. That's why I think it's important for us to do this show. I think it's specifically important for us, for a native Canadian and a black dude that's born in Germany who lived in Florida. Like, I think it's important for us because it is being able for us as minorities to say, hey, here's what we're going through. Here's what we would want you guys to do.
Hmm. And see it in like a way, like, because I think this the type of audience for this show for Fresh Prince is like, yeah, it is aiming more towards like white folks, but like the jokes that are in there for people of color always hit the hardest. And like it's episodes like this that really show the lived experience of people of color, specifically black people. And I just love it for that reason, like because the show doesn't end with a definite answer. It's like I love that, like because there is no definite answer to how we're treated because of some ignorance. And like how if we like for example I if I had to stop at a house because my car broke down in my city, if I saw a person who was flying the, we call it the Métis flag. It's a
Mm-hmm.
blue infinity symbol. It represents the Métis people who are traditionally people of French and Indigenous heritage. And I would
Mm-hmm.
go to that house first because I knew that they'd be okay with Native people. And
Right.
so it's stuff like that. Like, I like a lot of people don't see that part of the show, but I'm like, no, like this is a part of their life where the racism is is an undercurrent of other things.
Right.
And I love the show for that. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
I think it's very important that it does that, and I do think it's very important that this first season they do talk a lot about that heritage and a lot about how we look into it. So it is very important. Do you have any other notes for this episode? That I said we were going to go short and we didn't.
No, it's okay.
But
I think we're at the end. Yeah.
I had a lot of anger, or not anger. You know, like I said, I think it's a very important conversation that we had, and you know, we've been getting our feedback for the show, and I think this is the thing that is important about this. Like, if I was going to tell you, hey, this is the episode I want you to listen to, it'd probably be this one. I think this is the most emblematic thing because it was us having a very frank conversation that I don't think four white dudes from Minnesota would be like, qualified to have. Not shitting on four white dudes from Minnesota. I love those guys.
Yeah, Minnesota's awesome. But yeah, I hear you because it's just like the way this show hits, or this episode specifically hits a native girl and a black man. Like it's gonna hit a lot differently than if it was like a white kid who grew up in a suburb in Minnesota.
Right.
It's just like because like even though because I just keep thinking about like the movie Do the Right Thing and how similar it is to a lot of stuff I experience, and it has to, like, I am not a black person, but the only stuff I had was black media, and seeing
Right.
my story in some ways within the same universe makes me feel less alone because I've experienced this type of thing, and I love that, and being able to talk about it and it's just overwhelming to me. I just love it. And do
All
my
right.
TED talk. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to do my TED talk today. So I really like this show. I love doing this show. Again, a little bit behind the curtain. Me and Sonya just recorded an episode before this one with a friend of both of ours. She is now your friend, Sonya. So you cannot say she's not a friend of both of ours. So that was really great. That is coming up in the future. But for plugs, I'm going to go first. I'm going to let Sonya have the floor because I want to plug, since we did have that friend, and because of what we're talking about now, I want to plug some episodes I did at Laser Time.
Yes, please.
I've done a couple of, so Laser Time Podcast is a podcast network ran by Chris and but they have a number of shows. But the Laser Time show itself, I did a number of actually very black-centric shows that I feel very, very comfortable in sharing. I love them. I did a episode talking about the history of Tyler Perry, Shonda Rhimes shows with both Chris and Sarah, which is really great. With Chris and Sarah, I also did a great episode on Kwanzaa, and quite possibly one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done with me, Chris, and Sam. We talked about blaxploitation films.
Oh, that was my favorite episode. Yeah.
And I love blaxploitation films, and we get to talk about them soon. I know we had Richard Roundtree recently with the Professor No episode, but it's really, really great. I love that, and I love doing those shows, and I love, like I said, I know I've seen a lot of people pigeonhole me like, oh, well, he's talking about black things, but I was like, but I love it. Like, I love talking about, my history because it's my history. And that's something that, like, I feel like it would be remiss if that stuff goes away just because it's not in the cultural zeitgeist because white people control that, right? So
yeah,
that's my thing. I also do P&B, but that's my plug. I wanted to plug that since I'm on my whole bullshit right now. Sonya, what would you like to plug?
Well, check us out at Pool House Live on Twitter. We're still ramping up there. As we watch more episodes, I keep remembering certain things, and I keep tagging Pool House Live. So you can also find me at honey_child on Twitter. I talk a lot about upcoming episodes of Live at the Pool House. Talk about other things. I'm also looking to write some more, so check out my blog at Sonya Ballantyne SonyaBallantyne.com. And yeah, like, keep listening, give us a good review. Face the wall if you don't have a good review and wait for the moment to pass, and then but yeah, like, if you like, hit us up if you like the show. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, like I said, if you have valid criticism, please, we will have a conversation. Now, your criticism, and I'm not doing this to be snipe the dude that gave us criticism, because I do think.
He was good. It was nice.
Yeah, I actually do think there was a point to his criticism. However, if you come with a criticism, please note, one, I hate everything that I do because I'm a masochist. And me and Sonya are writers, so we know how to be like, you're like, oh, that sucks. It's like, oh, buddy, you don't know how much you like. We like listen to this and you're like, I said that. Of course I'm ruining this, right? So don't worry about that. But don't be afraid if we push back at some of the ideas that are given to us. And the reason why I say that, it's not to be dismissive or flippant to what you're saying, but a lot of times that when we do stuff, we have thought about it, right? Mm-hmm. And we are creative, so we have gone through a vetting process. So how we do our episodes, we are still getting our foot and are getting our toes behind it, right? But at the same time, like, we know what we're looking for. We know how we're kind of aiming it. So, just chill on that. That's what I would say to you. Just chill on that.
Yeah, I'm just like, you do it then. Not kidding. But yeah, like, it was valid criticisms, and I understand that. But it's like, we are doing the show first and foremost as a, like, we look at everything from a racial point of view because of our backgrounds. Like, we cannot do that. Like, I'm trying to pitch a episode to Laser Time about colonization in films and how Native people are often only portrayed as aliens or genetically modified apes. Like, it's really, like, it's something I really want to talk about, but I understand people can be like, oh, social justice warrior stuff, boo, like, just talk about the show. But I don't think the show would be fun if it was just us reading the Wikipedia page.
Right. No, yeah, I think to actually have the conversation and learn about it, I think that's what's way more important.
Exactly. But thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Next week's show, is next week the poem show?
Next week is the Rafael De La Ghetto episode.
So we are going to go back to having fun and looking at Jeffrey with an afro. All right. For Sonya Ballantyne, I am TL Foster. This is Live at the Pool House, and don't get thrown out like jazz.